thank you for being here, and thank you for your promptness. I'm Barbara Gorski. I've met most of you at an orientation, and you are just slightly past the halfway mark. So you need to be thinking about that in terms of the hours you have completed. You should be past 20 at this point to be finished in time. If you have questions about Business 200, I'll be here at the end. You can ask. Sam's out at the front desk. You could also ask him. And on your way out, you'll want to get a coupon here. Coupon, yes.
Always be marketing.
Yes, 20% off. Yeah. Of entire purchase. Well, you'll have to come get it to see.
Arcs Value Village Thrift Stores, 5 locations.
Ooh, 5 locations. So we are very lucky, and I am very pleased to have 5 panelists with us today who are going to talk about their careers in nonprofits. They're going to talk about the business aspect of getting what needs to happen in nonprofits. At the end, we're going to have time for some Q&A, so if you have specific questions. What prompted the midterm to be formed was that we would have students who, about this point in the semester, would wander into my office or talk to their facilitators and would say, I really like the culture of the nonprofit. I like that I'm getting up in the morning, and the days I'm volunteering, it feels like I'm doing something that matters. And some students would even say, I can't imagine going back to a cubicle like my internship. In the nonprofit, I get to do a lot of different things. I wish I'd gotten a degree in social work, because then I could work in a nonprofit or in education. And what the midterm panel is about is helping you see that, in fact, your business degree is extremely needed in nonprofits. And we don't talk about nonprofits in your other class. Business 200 is the place that this happens. And my hope is to have you recognize that there's this whole other avenue, this whole other career path that we don't talk about, where your business skills, whatever it is you're studying, HR, operations, international business, management, marketing, accounting, finance, all of those are needed in nonprofits. Students will sometimes say to me, well, I'd like to go in nonprofits, but I'm leaving with $50,000 in debt. Thank you, St. Thomas. And how do I go home and explain to my parents I'm going to take this job in a nonprofit where I could be working in a for-profit and making $30,000 more? And if you haven't yet had your third class, have any of you had class 3 yet? Nope, it's coming up. We'll talk about the research about that, but I think it's helpful to hear firsthand from folks who are out there actually doing this stuff. So let's start at the far end. And if you'll introduce yourself, tell us about your nonprofit.
I'm Randy Treichel. I work with Urban Business Adventures and Keystone Community Services. Part of the organization I work with is Express Bike Shop, and over the years other retail ventures that are both traditional businesses, but then behind the scenes we work with young people to teach them the tools of entrepreneurship and small business operation. We've been doing this kind of social enterprise work for about 25 years.
And Randy, how long have you been there?
23.
And your job title?
Enterprise Director.
All right. Hello, I'm Diana Dawson. I'm our Community Relations Manager for Bridging. I've actually been on staff for 11 years. I started as a volunteer myself, as an events volunteer. Prior to that, I was with the YMCA, which we'll get into some of that, I think. But Bridging is who I work for. It's a nonprofit in town that provides furniture and household goods to families in need. So you may have heard about it. P.S. If you have service hours, I'll keep you busy. Come talk to me later if you're behind. So we take in those donated goods. It's a big, giant reuse center. Stuff that's out there in the community, home donors, corporate donors, we take it in, we pass it on so that someone can get a fresh start and get a basic home set up. So all our families come by way of referral, and they get everything they need so they can launch into the next piece of their life, whether it's getting healthy, going to school, going to work.
Thanks, Diana. I'm going to interrupt 1 second. If you have something that looks like this, yours is probably much smarter than mine. if you'll please make sure it's turned off. And I think it would be better if we just listen than if you're trying to take notes or something on a computer. So out of respect for our speakers, go ahead and turn off our buzzers and our screens. Thank you. And tell us about you.
I'm Sarah Sternberger. I'm the Executive Director of Free Arts Minnesota. We're a nonprofit that works with youth in challenging circumstances. So we partner with about 26 organizations, everything from homeless shelters, daycare centers that are serving low-income neighborhoods, day treatment recovery centers for youth. And what we do is we partner caring adults and arts learning, and we go into these sites and we work with kids on generally on a weekly basis. And so we bring them the arts and also adult contacts so that they can develop, kind of build trust again. You know, a lot of these kids have either been disappointed by an adult in their life, or the adults in their life are keeping them highly structured. You know, they've got caseworkers or psychologists or their parents, and we just give them time to just be themselves and express themselves through the arts.
I'm Melanie Harding, and I work for Tamarack Nature Center in White Bear Township. We are not a nonprofit. We are a county facility. We operate a lot like a nonprofit, so it's a good way to kind of start thinking outside of the box a little bit. But I have worked for many nonprofits in my career, and I'm also a student in the Masters of Nonprofit Management over at Hamline University. And I look forward to talking with you today. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Laurel Hansen, and I'm the business director at the ARC Greater Twin Cities and our social enterprises, where I spend my time directing our ARC's Value Village thrift stores. Our stores have been around for 33 years. We now have the 5 locations, our flagships in Richfield. We've had some great St. Thomas students that have worked on behalf of our social enterprise as well. I've been with the organization, this is my 30th year, a milestone for me. And I wear a lot of hats, and our stores benefit the ARC services, which are for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We're an advocacy organization in the Twin Cities.
Laurel, ARC. ARC. Now, there's a couple of organizations. Animal Rescue Center.
Not us.
Not you. You made a decision to stay with your acronym, even though the name it came from fell out of social favor. Talk about that branding issue.
Sure. Well, branding is certainly a big part of any enterprise as a nonprofit, and then, of course, the business side of things. So we're part of a national organization called ARC and have a common mission. So we didn't really ever consider dropping the name for that reason, but we certainly do spend more time on key messaging around what we do and the broad audience that we serve. And it becomes particularly I don't know if challenging, it's an opportunity, I think, with the business to differentiate ourselves from all the other thrift stores around town. And we're trying new and creative ways all the time to differentiate what ARC's Value Village is and what we stand for and what we do. Just last week, we had a fashion show where all the models had Down syndrome and other developmental disabilities. So that really brings home the message in a really unique and fun way.
I have to be on mic, so we're taped. Sarah, let's start with you. Tell us about your background, your professional background.
So I graduated from the other big M of the Midwest, University of Missouri. So I had my business degree, and then I got my master's in healthcare administration and my MBA there as well. I actually started my career in healthcare, so I've been a senior healthcare executive for probably 20 plus years before going into the nonprofit sector. Healthcare is technically, in Minnesota at least, nonprofit, but it doesn't feel that way. It's pretty bottom line oriented, just like most business or for-profits are. But, you know, I had a great run, but it was time for me to do something different. And I really wanted to work with organizations that had a more direct service component, directly with working with clients or partner agencies. and that were also very mission driven. So I was at Bridging. Diana was one of my direct reports when I was there. I was there for 5 years. And then I recently started with Free Arts Minnesota, really super small nonprofit. I'm doing another kind of turnaround, which kind of had to do with Bridging. When I started, we were like $300,000 in debt. Getting kind of tired of doing those turnarounds, but I just like to coast out. but I can do it. So yeah, so it's been different. I would say that for sure your business degree is super valuable. Nonprofits do need to run like a business. They run a little bit differently than a traditional business, but they still need to run, like a business. I mean, no margin, no mission. So you have to focus on, your sources and uses of funds. And you also have, I think there's a higher mark that nonprofits have to hit because we're being stewards of someone else's money. So I think most of the folks that I know in the nonprofit sector take that responsibility very seriously. But we're going to be like people like me and Laurel, maybe all of us on this panel, are probably going to retire in the next 10, 20 years. And there's a lot of us that are retiring out of the nonprofit sector. So we need leadership. We need good talent in the pipeline to take over these key positions.
Diana, tell us about your background.
So I graduated from Marquette University, the only one in my family who didn't go to St. Thomas. I left town, came back to town, and I started my career path in, my degree was sociology, family studies and English minors, and everyone goes, why English? Well, you got to write. You got to communicate with people all the time. You got to know how to do that. So I jumped into the YMCA, the Southdale branch. I had 10 years at the Y, both at a branch level running school-age care programs, then came back after I left and had my own business. I work also on family business and entrepreneurial, so I understand that mindset, and you gotta have a drive to wanna be a part of something, but also I like the idea of controlling something. Sarah knows this. I like to build it, grow it, and I have that freedom to do that in a nonprofit of our size. When you have only 30 employees and you've got a couple locations, not 20, I can do that. I can get creative and I can get entrepreneurial. My first job out at the Y, I was on my own. I had no boss. Until I worked with Sarah and at Bridging, I never had a boss next to me. From 23 on, I got to run my own ship. I liked that. So I ran with it. So not only at the Y, then I was a product manager at the association, so I worked through the ranks. At the YMCA, the beauty of why I liked that and why I continued to stay a nonprofit and the right kind of nonprofit is I like a nonprofit that also runs like a business. Sarah and I have talked about this many a times, and I'm sure others on this panel, is when someone goes, oh, I bet it's so great to work at a nonprofit in December, and I'm like, well, I like the work I do all 12 months of the year. This feels great all the time, and it's pretty special. On the other hand, when someone has less expectation of me because I work in nonprofit, it is a challenge for those of us who are constantly battling that and saying, no, we need to be good stewards, we need to run a business. We're serving people and we're mission focused, not bottom line, but I've stayed on that path, and my time at Bridging has been from running volunteers to now what I do is community relations. So it's the volunteer programs, it's marketing, it's communications, building community partners, which is right up my alley because I get to go swim with the big dogs at Target and Best Buy and then come back and do what I want.
Laurel, tell us about your background.
Sure. Well, 30 years with our organization, came into our organization as a communications major, but quickly found that the retail experience that I had in my past was where I wanted to spend my time on business. So I started with the ARC 30 years ago and spent my first 10 years managing their thrift stores, and have spent the last 20 years opening and growing 4 additional locations, and overall responsibility for 350 employees, about 6,000 volunteers a year, and about half of our agency's revenue. So this is an enterprise that we measure with what we call a triple bottom line. So we run it like a business. So it's profit, people, and planet. And so profit comes first because ARC can't serve without the funds, but also people, helping people with disabilities. Workforce development is another passion of mine in the stores. helping people with disabilities learn business skills. And then also Planet, we're a green environmental business. So 3 times the fun, 3 times the responsibility when you have a triple bottom line.
Randy, tell us about your background.
Trying to think of how to tell it in a way that's at least mildly instructive. It's my career trajectory is kind of odd. I left the university with a semester left to take a sales job in medical products, which I'd been in prior to that anyway, and sold medical products for 8 years, and then I went to a company that anybody raise your hand if you remember VHS tapes. Anybody come? There we go. I went to early in the video business. I went to a company and was a regional vice president selling video programs to Super America and large grocers. So traveled a lot. My transition to I think I came up in a home that was always pretty community focused, and I got that from my parents, and so that was always a part of what we were doing in terms of volunteering and trying to figure out ways to make the neighborhood better. And so an opportunity came to me because what much like I think people have talked about already, it seems like what we have in common even more than working for nonprofits is this like fiercely independent streak. You know, it's and I get that from small organizations, nonprofit or for-profit. Once they get too large and I don't feel like I can have an impact, I lose my footing. So the company that I started with, Video Services, is 23 people. We grew it to about 150 employees, and then we're bought out by the second largest video distributor in the country, and the job just changed dramatically. And I had an opportunity. I've been volunteering with what was then Youth Express, and Jim, the founder, and a friend of mine said, you know, what if we talked about doing these enterprises that would help create jobs for young people in the community, and unemployment in our neighborhood has always been running very high for young people. So we decided to give it a try, and I went and made that change, and the best thing I ever did. So for 20 years I've been doing that.
Randy, how much did you guys need for startup of the enterprises?
It varies over the years. The bike shop 20 years ago, less than $100,000, I think $80,000. But it's a lot of really, it's got to be pretty creative financing and a lot of partnerships. We got a super discounted rent from Liberty State Bank. We were at Marshall and Snelling, where it's a flat lot now, but it was an old gas station for years, and we got that for well under market rate because Liberty was hanging on to it for future expansion, and so I think we were renting that for $600 a month. And let me tell you, 50,000 cars a day makes you look like a marketing genius. If we hadn't started there, we wouldn't be here now.
Melanie, tell us about your background.
Sure. So I did not start out in business. I have a degree in biology from Albion College in Michigan. I grew up in Michigan. And kind of late in my college career, I figured out that I was really more interested in the environmental side of biology. And that fiercely independent streak that that Randy was talking about kind of started to shine. My school didn't really have a lot in that area, so I set out to find it myself, and that has been extremely helpful along the way. Just having that experience of really finding something that you're passionate about and making it happen for yourself. I found a couple of internships and in nature centers. I've had to move around a little bit. I moved around a little bit to get myself started. As a young professional, I worked in a nature center and made very little money, but enough to live, which is good, and a lot of aspiration. So over time, I kind of branched out a little bit. I did some freelancing on my own for a while. That independent streak came out again. Found that I really wanted to continue doing what I love to do in working with nature centers and working with educational institutions, But at that moment in time, I couldn't support myself on doing it myself without the support of a larger organization. So I also worked for a for-profit during that time. I worked for a car dealership. So I've been on that side too, and I was not a salesperson. I'm not going to sell you a car today. So I'm not that person. And but it was a really interesting experience to be on both sides of the fence at the same time. I over time branched out. I worked for Minnesota Children's Museum for 4 years, coordinating special projects there. I worked for Garfield Park Conservatory in Chicago for 8 years. That is a nonprofit arm of a public institution. So that partnering of public and private was really a great experience, and I think where things are going to be going in the future. You're going to be seeing more of that. So along with partnerships with for-profit enterprises. So, and now I decided at some point that I really wanted to go back to school, but I needed to back off a little bit in my work in order to do that. So I came to Minnesota, and I work for Tamarack Nature Center up in White Bear. I'm a naturalist coordinator, which basically means I wear a lot of hats, like like everyone else up here. I think you'll find that in nonprofit, which is mostly a blessing, I think, because you really get to try out different things, find out where your passions are and where your strengths are, and really have a very diverse day. You could be doing any number of things at any given time of day. I also coordinate volunteers for the Nature Center, so that's a big part of my job. And have gotten myself back into school, like I said, and have aspirations for taking on more leadership in my field. So I'm moving toward that. And I'm just being a sponge, just learning even that, I've been out of college for 24 years. And so, but just always being a sponge and learning whatever you can along the way, regardless of the situation that you're in, is a good thing. So, and you can see just from this panel how varied nonprofit can be, and how, and every day it's a business. It's a business. It's about people, and it's about money, and it's about efficiency and effectiveness and all of those things. We might not have a financial bottom line, but we have a mission-based bottom line, and we're always doing self-checks back to ourselves about, is this something that's supporting the mission that I work for? And so it's similar in that way. It's more similar than you might think. So.
Let's continue to talk money for a minute. So there are 8 ways that nonprofits can generate revenue. Let's identify what those are. Randy, how do you guys get money?
Do I have to name all that?
No, you just have to tell us what you guys do.
Pass-fail.
And then anything we don't cover, they'll come up with. Yeah.
Sure. For us, the model we have with our social enterprises is that 70% of the revenue, ultimately, after a runway of 3 to 5 years, 70% of the operating costs of the enterprise need to be covered by earned income.
Okay, so
Or
earned
sales
income.
revenue. Yep,
All
for us
right.
it's, we also look for grants, some government support, and individual giving, things like that, to help us cover the costs of training. Because we don't expect any small business to be able to hire and pay for 15 people every year that aren't necessarily producing from day one.
Okay, so one of the things that nonprofits can do is they can create a center that generates profit.
Sure.
And that's what you do, and that's what you do. I mean, the thrift shop isn't the critical mission of the nonprofit. It's there to support the critical mission. So you could create a profit center within your nonprofit, essentially. How do you guys get funding?
Yeah, we
At
get a little
bridging.
tricky. We've got a budget of 2.9 million. And then that breaks down into 2 buckets. But before I do that, I remind folks that we also have $11 million in product that we don't account for in that budget because it's product been donated to us. So thrift store valued merchandise that we're handling, dealing with, and we have to staff for to handle. But that 2.9 million breaks into 2 buckets. Half is earned income. We actually charge, there's a few fees we have. So for someone to say, let's get our truck to your house, we say to our community, yeah, we could do that. You're going to help us pay the cost. It costs $100,000 a year to run our trucks, gas, insurance, and maintain. You can help me. So I don't have to fundraise completely for that. In addition, we have some other fees. So like when our clients come to us, they leave with $1,800 worth of stuff, but we ask for an appointment fee of $75 that gets paid to us. We also say, great, and if you want us to deliver your stuff to the home, a whole household of stuff, $180 gets that stuff to their home. So those are add-ons, things they can choose as a client comes through. That's the earned income bucket. When we talk about the other half, that's through 3 other buckets. You talk about straight giving, so anyone reaching in their pocket today as an individual, here's 10 bucks, here's 100. Grants, foundations, special events like the bed race at Buck Hill, a gala, anything we can do, third party, people giving us cash, civic clubs, church grants, you name it. Those are the 2 areas it's coming into us.
Okay, how many of you heard about the mattress race at Buck Hill? Any of you? Yeah, so 4 of you get on a mattress. I always thought it was kind of in a big plastic pillowcase, but it's on a...
You go down the tubing track, it's an actual queen mattress inside a vinyl cover.
Okay.
So no, you can't modify your bed and slick it up any.
Right. And then down the hill we go, and there's an entry fee for that.
Yeah, participants pay to play at the event, and then you can raise funds on top. We call it the Bucks for Bridging. So this year's event had just under 150 teams, and it brought in 91,000.
Amazing. So we have a profit center within a nonprofit, fundraisers, some of the most important monies for nonprofits, not always their largest, but important because it comes without any designation to it. It has to be used some way. Grants, many of those are through foundations, but it could be government grants with tax dollars. Individual donations. You get your stuff from where?
Primarily breaks down in 2 buckets. You've got your home donors, you, your friends, your neighbors. That's about 65% of our product.
Oh, wow.
The other 35% is look around your room. You're sitting on chairs right now. Let's say St. Thomas says, I don't like them anymore. They're the wrong color. Where does it go after us? You could liquidate maybe, but for many of our corporate and in-kind partners, they say, I'll give them to you. I'll take the tax write-off. Here you go. Here's some chairs.
So corporate donors, and they can give cash, they can give in-kind services, and volunteers. So, for instance, Wells Fargo is the largest corporate donor to junior achievement in terms of volunteers. So something that's really important to them. Let's hear some others. Do you get any tax dollars at Free Arts?
Yeah, we do. We actually get, one of our biggest funders is the Minnesota State Arts Board. So we do get money from the state to do our work. But I don't think, we don't get, I didn't come up with our name, but when you have a name like Free Arts Minnesota, it's really hard to have an earned income strategy. There's freeze in your name. It's a challenge.
Wow. And do you charge your clients or the organization that hosts them?
No, we really are at no cost to the partner side or to the youth.
And that's often a philosophical challenge for organizations, because if you charge your clients, so fee for service, if you charge your clients, then some people can't afford your services. Some organizations choose to do a sliding scale based upon your income, but then it creates this interesting dichotomy of folks who go to nonprofits for services and folks who don't. So when I go to the doctor, when I go to the grocery store, nobody asks to see my tax forms. If I'm living in poverty, I might as well get a copy of that tax form laminated and carry it around with me everywhere to see, how much do I earn, so how much do I charge. So some nonprofits say, we're not going to do a sliding scale, but that means there's a whole segment of revenue that you might not be able to count on. You're a government agency.
I work for a government agency now, so a lot of tax dollars, but it's remarkable because I just, having worked for several nonprofits, it's remarkably similar in the fact that we're not making money off of tax dollars. We will charge fees for services. We do programs. Sometimes we do programs for free, and sometimes we charge for programs. So depending on the experience and the audience, another another thing that happens often in the nonprofit scenario is that you have you're charging one audience so that you can serve an audience here that's less fortunate or cannot afford your services. So, and that's part of being able to balance that and people knowing that that's part of your mission. We also apply for grants, so we have some private funding, and in other places, a real kind of entrepreneurial line has come out where you might think of a product that you can develop and sell over time that will support your organization. You might think of a service or something like that. So at one point in my career, I was developing children's games and selling them, and it was supporting my organization. So so there's some real business opportunities there in terms of fundraising and creativity and your finance.
Do you have
how
a
you
gift
finance.
shop at the?
We do not. I
Oh.
have worked in places that have gift shops, but we do not have a gift shop. But that's another good strategy, and it especially if you can make people understand. A lot of times there's ways of phrasing things that will make people really understand how, like, every $5 that you spend at our gift store will allow this many kids, preschoolers, to come to for a field trip kind of thing. So and that helps too in your marketing for.
Well, what about you? So you've got the funds from the store.
Right. So the stores raise about $1 million plus a year for programs and services, and we've attempted to add product lines too as well. We now sell brand new mattresses that we purchase wholesale, and that adds a significant amount of revenue. We look for product gaps and opportunities, and some other smaller new product lines as well. And we've also started to bring in products that are made specifically by people who have developmental disabilities. So a couple of examples, an organization called Achieve, they make a natural detergent, laundry detergent that's actually packaged and marketed by people with disabilities. Minnesota Life College, they make a natural homemade or handmade dog biscuit, dog treats, and package in different size offerings, and people with disabilities are doing that as well. So we feel like we can be an incubator for that type of enterprise, and it can be a win-win. So as an organization, though, otherwise it's what you would expect: grants, galas, gifts, giving, that mix.
So let's see if we have the 8. Tax dollars, federal, state, local tax dollars, grants, private foundations for grants, but it could be government grants, corporate donations of the 3 kind, individual donations, a fee for service, a profit center within your nonprofit. What's that? Events, fundraising, thank you. And the one that wasn't mentioned, I'm not sure any of your organizations do it, is investments. A lot of larger nonprofits, as they get endowments, will do investments and will gain funds from the dividends on those investments. Do any of you do investing in your
Sure,
corporation?
that's true for some.
For some, yeah. I think you have to be bigger and have wealthy folks who like you die to be able to do that. I think that's how that works. Randy, would you do a little fashion show of your T-shirt?
Oh,
Oh, come on now, stand up, stand up.
Express.
it's our 20-year T-shirt.
Very good, very nice, very nice. Round of applause, yes. We have to encourage this behavior. Yeah.
Which is a T-shirt screener in St. Paul that works with homeless youth.
What's the name of it again?
Elpis Enterprise. It's
Elpis.
ELPIS.
Interesting, interesting. I want to read something. There was another woman who was going to be on the panel, and she couldn't be here. They had some staffing issues. But she wrote me this email last night. Barbara, I was really looking forward to the panel, but I'm short-staffed unexpectedly. I'm not going to be able to attend. Please ask me again in the future. I'm amazed how willing all of you are, and thank you. She said, What I would have shared is the reason I chose to work in nonprofit. It's the meaning of the work. I have a master's degree in organizational leadership and development. That's my doctoral degree. And a bachelor's degree in human resources. How many HR members are here? HR majors. Couple of HR majors? It is small, small major. I worked for 5 years for a large healthcare organization in Wisconsin before Hurricane Katrina. My family moved down to New Orleans and facilitated disaster response administration for a faith-based nonprofit. When we returned, I made the choice that I would commit to serve a nonprofit organization in the area of my giftedness. I can't go back to serving someone's bottom line. At the end of the day, what it is all about, the way we treat each other, our clients, and our staff. There's so many perks to being part of a nonprofit world, the nonprofit world. There's a genuine caring among our staff, a collaboration I'd never experienced. Everyone looks out for each other and works cross-functionally exceptionally well. And I wear jeans to work some days. Also, I take advantage of public service loan forgiveness. Now, this might be of interest to some of you. I had $90,000 in school loan debt for my graduate and bachelor's programs. Public service loan forgiveness allows you to make 120 qualifying payments, and then your debt is forgiven. It's about 10 years for folks who get this program. This program works in conjunction with income-based repayment. So with 3 children, at one point, my payment was only $15 a month. It would be nearly $800 if I were working for a nonprofit company. That makes up for the lower income, a for-profit, thank you. That makes up for the lower income that I would get based upon, in comparison to a nonprofit. I also have a very flexible schedule. I work from home on Wednesdays, and when my kids are sick, I've been able to support my aging parents and see them more often because I can work remotely. I'm given flexibility in my work and with taking on additional responsibilities in project. It's just a whole different ballgame. Responses, what are the benefits for you to nonprofit work?
Well, I totally agree. I get to wear jeans almost every day, which is awesome. We can bring our... Oh, yeah. I did have to wear a dress yesterday. It was painful. We can bring our dogs to work, so that's kind of fun. I think her email really captured that. Now, I will say there are crappy nonprofits out there. There really are, and we probably all know many of them ourselves. So, it's not this wonderful, perfect, glitters and ponies across the board, but it's like any job, you interview, you get a sense of the culture, you determine if it's a good fit for you. But I would say the flexibility for me, and that's part of the reason I went into nonprofit work. My kids were in high school. I want to be able to spend more time with them before they went off to school, and super flexible, which is great. Same for my staff. If they're sick or they have something they need to do, they can leave, no questions asked.
I want to follow up with that. Is that because there's less work to do?
No. No. We're a really small nonprofit. We're about $620,000 and 7 staff total. All my staff are under the age of 32 years old. Super smart, super energetic, super committed. The concept for us, and I think if you're a good boss, this is how you treat your staff. You get the work done. If it takes you 5 hours one day and 12 hours next, so we'll work on Saturdays, and if we have events, we all kind of put our time in, and I'm going to be doing a site observation this evening. So, you just work until you get the work done, and if you're efficient and you get it done faster, good for you.
So seat time is not.
Yeah, we don't
The
look
evaluation
at
method.
we look at results, not who's in the office at 7 a.m. and there till 6. So that's also different from a lot of for-profits measure your progress by how long you're in the office. That's not what we do.
Melanie, I'm sorry, I interrupted. You were getting ready to say
No.
something.
I would agree. I think one of the biggest perks, something that has kept me in the nonprofit world is that sense of even the crappy nonprofits, you find yourself often with a team of people that is truly a team, and there's this recognition that we all are human beings and we all have lives outside of work, and that we cover for each other. So workload shifts, and it's not that you're not held responsible, it's not that you're not held accountable, but often you have some support systems that you may not entirely true. I can't speak across the board, but my experience, even in the kind of crappy organizations, is that there's a support system that it isn't. It may not be across the board, but you'll find it. It's there, and it will allow you some flexibility that you might not have in other places. So, yeah.
I'm going to throw it in there as bringing it down to some dollars and cents things here, folks. Right from the get-go, I knew I'm a traveler. The idea of going somewhere that only gave me 2 weeks a year frightened the heck out of me. I'm like, no, I need more than that. So I have always said, there's a pay, yes. I don't want to be compensated professionally in the right rate. Yeah, you had to climb through that. I only still stay in nonprofit because I want to earn what I'm worth. But I also factor into that very heavily. You work at the right nonprofit, great benefits packages, and great vacation PTO. And that's, to me, you got to know what your wants are. It'd be nice to have I don't even want that. I clearly understand what my high wants are, and I've always driven towards that. And so if you know that, you can start choosing based on that. So
I'm pretty agnostic on this nonprofit, for-profit thing. The only reason I say that is I've had really cool experiences at small companies. Culture and camaraderie and kind of a shared sense of mission when it's working, and when it's not any fun anywhere. But I think that I think you can get that. For me, it comes, like I said, in the package of pretty small. I think most of the organizations I've worked in throughout my life, it's probably less than 20 people when I started. So that gives you some flexibility. It's the headaches of learning about stuff you don't want to learn about. But I'm in charge of HR, and that's a pretty bad play by the organization. But it's someone's got to do it, right? I mean, so I think it's those kind of things that I think are, and that's where you get kind of, the passion's got to be there no matter what you're doing. But I think like I said, for me, it's do I have an ability to impact my day? And in a way that helps us advance the mission that's most important to us. And that, like I said, for me, that comes in small packages.
So, size. So, if you were at Big Brothers Big Sisters headquarters,
Sure.
It
Probably
might
no
feel
interest.
very different.
Probably no interest for me, and that's no knock at Big Brothers Big Sisters. No, I left. I mean, I don't know if you can appreciate. I mean, I went from running a division in a company when we merged with the larger. We merged the second largest video distributor in the country. It was huge, and I'm on the phone, and it happened this quick. I was on the phone with someone in Omaha, and we were arguing about what color should be on the pump toppers at an auto stop in Siren, Wisconsin. And I thought, this is really not where I thought I'd be at this point in my life. And I kind of hung up the phone and said, I got to do something different. It's time. I got to go. This isn't what I signed on for. So.
Yeah, for some of us, we have those watershed moments.
Exactly.
Where it's like, that's it.
And I worked for Greater Twin Cities United Way for a while, and I'm still a donor and active volunteer with them. But I can tell you, I would probably not do well working there. I walked in yesterday for a meeting. They've got now a sign-in system, a guest badge thing. I'm like, what the hell is this for? I'm like, you guys aren't 3M. I mean, come on. I mean, so you could just tell the shift. So what happens in nonprofits, they always start with passion. At some point, though, they've got to move to professionalism. But then as the larger you get, the more corporate it's going to feel. So Lutheran Social Services, United Way, Catholic Charities, they're all big. They're all, you get that corporate feel, which isn't not a knock, I mean, that's great for some people. But it's going to feel more like a for-profit environment.
Goodwill's one of the biggest retailers in the Twin Cities, and very much run like a big business. And so I just think that whole scale of nonprofits, you can't generalize. You're going to have professional opportunities just relative to that individual organization, and very competitive with for-profit in some instances.
So certainly something to think about as you're thinking about your own career development is the culture of the organization you want to work in. I mean, that's what I'm hearing you talk about. And for some folks, a large organization is perfect. There's a set career track in there. You feel part of a big community. There's name recognition. You're sitting on that plane next to somebody and, oh, what do you do? Well, I work for 3M. You know, I work for Free Arts. Okay, well, I'll just keep reading my magazine then. Yeah, because people don't know what to say next. So there's certainly many benefits to large organizations, nonprofits or for-profits. But I'm hoping that you're thinking about what culture fits the best for me. What's the right fit? It's not simply a particular job, but it's really the organization that you're joining.
Barbara?
Yes.
I would say, too, that coming into a nonprofit, you may have more immediate leadership opportunities, the opportunity to develop programs and to implement your own vision and to really run with something. You may have more freedom to lead earlier in your career.
I'd agree with that, and be a generalist.
And I want to just throw in there, because my path took me with the YMCA, so there's benefit as you're exiting college and trying to figure out what you want to do. The benefit I had is I worked at a branch level and off-site and smaller scale, left for 5 years, came back and worked at the association. So I had the opportunities to try many different things, which was great. So there's a benefit to some of the bigger nonprofits for the sake of exploration. So think of that option too.
It's almost like you get to do rotations like a medical student would in a number of different settings. Let's talk some nitty-gritty. You make less than you would in a corporate setting, I'm assuming. Randy's maybe not.
Well, I think it depends upon the job. I mean,
Depends
it really
upon the
does.
job,
Could
okay.
I make more selling something? Sure, of course. I mean, I'm sure of that.
What could an executive director make at a medium-sized nonprofit? What are those salaries looking like?
100 grand, decent benefit package.
Okay.
100, real low 100s.
Okay. And how many years of experience would I probably need?
Man,
Depends on the organization.
You know, somebody was mentioning that there's gonna be a churn coming up, and there hasn't been for a while. So I think a lot of people, most nonprofit directors that I know in that mid-sized range have been there for 20 years.
Yeah.
There's
And
not-
we're
doesn't seem-
retiring.
and now they're retiring. But I think that's it's been for I've seen most of it be like I said 15, 20 years. But I don't think that's necessarily true. But I mean, necessarily it's not the rule, but it's where it kind of sits.
Well, and we have a couple of nonprofits that have come out of St. Thomas. So folks just a year or two older than some of you are off as executive directors of nonprofits. How has that changed your lifestyle? Or how would your lifestyle be different if you were doing your same kind of thing but in a for-profit setting in terms of salaries? So Diana, you're still traveling.
Yeah, that's right. I wouldn't be traveling as much. I know for a fact I would not have the vacation package, plain and simple. I don't know. I think as Sarah started 5 years ago, she did a great job getting us to market value, and that really goes cross-sector. I really feel that I'm competitive, so that's the beauty. When I go talk to and hang out with Target and Best Buy Community Affairs, I don't think we're making that much different salary. I know I have a much more freedom and great vacation.
So the salaries may not be that different.
Not maybe in my world, I don't think.
To fight some of that myth.
Yeah, I think nonprofits are getting more competitive. I mean, it depends on size, but I think Diana's right. You might take a little bit of a trade-off on salary, but generally the paid time off and the benefits are great, and the flexibility. I can tell. I mean, working in healthcare for 20 plus years. My husband's a doctor, so I worked with doctors all the time, and I used to come home and say, you know, I love my job, and I'd love it even more if I didn't have to work with doctors. So clearly, I wasn't going to be a long-termer in that field. It was stressful. You know, I mean, I would have to say, you know, and I loved it. I loved the work, but I just got to a point where it was just super stressful. And you do have to wear a suit to work every day, and you do have to deal, with the bottom line all the time, and you've got people pushing on you all the time, and it's just different. It's just different. And I also like, like Diana said, she likes the control. I think all of us like to kind of be in charge, whether you're at the top of the organization or you're somewhere in the middle. It doesn't really matter. You feel responsible, and you've got responsibility, and you've got the flexibility to do what you need to do in that position.
I'm going to shift gears to your last question, and then we'll take some questions from the audience. What's the biggest management challenge facing your organization at this point, or the biggest challenge facing your organizations? Laurel?
So running a retail nonprofit social enterprise and maintaining a workforce of 350 plus people, in addition to the volunteer pool. It's the competition for hiring and the low unemployment rate that's creating challenges for us, increasing turnover, making retention challenging. And we, on the wage side for our hourly associates that we employ, it's hard to be competitive when the Aldi next door is paying $13 an hour, and there goes the mission margin in our business.
In some ways, you're kind of the training program for other retail settings, Target or whatever.
Even less now, though. When everybody's hiring, it's great for prospects looking for employment, but it's just challenging for nonprofits to be competitive.
Okay, so hiring issues, getting personnel.
Yeah,
Melanie?
we are experiencing we're in a time of immense growth, very quick growth, very substantial growth. And so one of the biggest challenges that we are facing right now at the Nature Center in terms of management is making sure all of the systems and all of the staffing and everything keeps up with that growth. So it's definitely a challenge. So you suddenly have 100,000 people coming to your center instead of 50,000, and the facilities get worn down, and there's vandalism, and there's not enough staff around to make sure that people are having a good experience, and there's more demand for actual programs, and it's hard because you want to say if the people come, the money will follow, but it doesn't always happen immediately. So strategically finding ways to handle growth, short-term growth, or permanent, very quick permanent growth in the short term, so that we can be successful and sustainable in the long term. So that's our biggest, we're having that big challenge right now.
So hiring and growth. Randy, biggest challenge?
Well, I think, again, our challenges are probably like Laurel was mentioning, it's the challenges of any retail or training enterprise. We actually maintain, we're actually a subsidiary of Keystone Community Services, a nonprofit subsidiary. And part of the reason we did that is because Keystone has a very, Keystone's workforce is much older than ours is, quite honestly. And so consequently, the benefit package was really skewed in that direction. The people we hire, 20s, early 30s, and we really benefit from being able to keep them around. A lot of things matter to them more than a dental plan. They prefer to have HSAs where they can have cash in there that they can use to buy glasses and things like that. It's all just weirdness that goes in that direction, but it's those kind of things that you just keep having to tweak around, because right now I've got a management team with 3 people that nobody's over 32, and we have collectively 22 years of experience between them. So that's really good for us, but it's a battle to always keep it that way. And the other challenges we have, like I said, are challenges that we spend a great deal of our time trying to figure out how to prepare young people for that next big thing in their life, and that requires coaching with candor. That requires not just telling them they're doing a great job, but explaining to them where they're coming up short, why, and how they can improve. And that's hard. I mean, every single business I've been in since I was 17 years old struggles with that. It's always that's always the challenge. So it's just those same kind of things.
Diana, biggest challenge facing bridging?
Say two things. One, I'm going to echo Laurel. Half of our 32 employees work in our warehouses and our delivery teams, and it really comes down to it's hard to pay the right amount to keep people retained in this market right now. And so we're losing folks to places, and it can be you could ride that wave, and all of a sudden, boom, a couple start moving, and then you got to start all over. So you're in that when you need those staff. You're desperate to run your operation. You need them. The other piece of it, we run with so many great volunteers. I will say there's a shift that we have to deal with in terms of our retirees. They're awesome, but the generational differences, just as you hear about millennial differences to Gen X and go through the boomers, the difference between a greatest generation volunteer and a boomer volunteer are so different that it's disrupting our operation. Greatest generation says, great, I'm going to be here every Tuesday at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'll be here every Tuesday. They might miss 1 or 2 weeks. Great. The boomer, they have grandkids, they're traveling, they're moving, and they're like, how flexible? Can I show up once, and then I'll tell you when I'll be back again? And it's shifting us and our operation tremendously, which means you need more staffing resources to offset that, which means financial differences, when we didn't have to do that before. So, and then our organization is still growing operationally. So you mesh that all together, and that's the challenge, working through it.
Sarah?
Well, so I joined Free Arts Minnesota last June under the promise of we're financially stable and our board is great and our staff is, they're just firing on all cylinders. Well, guess what? None of that was really true. We were not financially stable. We had a horrible 2015. We're ended with a deficit. So number one on my mind right now is money. I got to get the ship righted again. And that adds to when you're responsible for a workforce, no matter what the size, you really feel personally responsible for the people that you work with. So that's kind of stressful as well. My board's good, but I wouldn't say they're great. Working with boards can be really challenging in the nonprofit sector. You may have a great board if you're lucky, but most nonprofit executives that are friends of mine or colleagues will tell you that their board always needs some work. Either you don't have the right people, or they don't get nonprofit work, or they want to manage for you instead of letting you manage. So there's always a lot of challenges there. And I'm working with the board. I'm going to be losing 6 board members at the end of this year, so we're in high recruitment mode. So that's a challenge. I think those are kind of my two. I really didn't want to do another turnaround, but that's where I've landed. So I will do it again for the 3rd time.
And then in your retirement, you could just consult to people doing
Yeah, I
turnarounds?
really was hoping to join a job where I could help them grow. I'm in a job where I've got to save the organization, which I can do. It just wasn't what I signed up for. So, that happens.
Well, I'm going to invite Sam, who's a BUSN200 facilitator. He may be your facilitator. And I'm going to take one microphone from here. And this one's working. This one, Nick, could we have a little more volume on this one? 2A, mobile 2A. We're going to work the audience and give questions. We want to capture it on mic so that we're good. What questions do you have? Careers, nonprofits. Here we go. I'll run around here to the back. Tell us who you are and where you're doing your service. And stand up.
I'm David Stevens. I'm working at ESNS, Eastside Neighborhood Services, out in East Minneapolis. I'm helping with their 20-year anniversary wine tasting. Everybody be there. It's May 15th. 45 head charge, so. Okay, I guess. I think all of us were, in our second meeting, were asked to watch a TED Talk done by Dan Paletta. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's kind of arguing, or not arguing, but kind of showing the misconceptions of nonprofits and the differences between nonprofits and for-profits and the difficulties with those misconceptions in order to grow as a large nonprofit. So do you guys personally notice those misconceptions in your work, or is it less so being that you're a smaller nonprofit company, whereas he's raising, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars? I guess on a smaller scale, do you still feel ramifications from those misconceptions?
The point this gentleman makes, thank you, great question, and I had actually wanted to talk about that, so perfect. The point that this gentleman makes in his TED Talk is he was really kind of punished for spending lots of money to raise lots of money. That all of your funds should go to serve your client. Whereas if Under Armour wants to market this, nobody sits around and says, oh, I can't believe you're spending that much on marketing, because they're going to make a lot of money. You need back brace, I think, with that thing. So do you feel that pressure, and particularly the way we've set up evaluation systems, where one of the critical metrics is how much of your dollar goes to serve your client?
Right.
How do you deal with that?
It's still out there. I mean, it's getting better. I think a lot of the watchdog agencies, Charity Navigator, GuideStar, there's a nonprofit called the Charities Defense Council. This is an interesting story. They've been huge supporters of the Wounded Warrior program, which you might have heard about, that CEO and CFO who got fired by their board for lavish, quote unquote, spending. But I will say this: they were spending a lot of money to raise a lot of money, and it was good. It was a good investment. But they also were spending money on things like the CEO rappelling down a building and having a big party for staff, and that kind of stuff. I think donors have a problem with. Understandably, it's like, you're using our money to do this kind of stuff. I mean, it's not like we're little poor people, and you don't take a vow of poverty when you join a nonprofit. But you still have to be good stewards of the money that you're raising. So you shouldn't do stupid things with it. That said, I'll tell you the one misconception that I still deal with, and Diane and I have talked about this before, is, oh, you poor little nonprofit. You people probably work for free, or you don't know what you're doing. Can we help you, big for-profit? We know all about IT and HR, and we can help you with your little problems. That so ticks me off. It's just like, no, we're not idiots here. We do know what we're doing. Most of us do. So that idea that you're in the nonprofit sector because you're not smart enough, and or you work for free. Diane and I have had volunteers say, "Oh, you must love working here." And do they pay you anything to work here? Like, really? Are you kidding me? So those kind of things are just little nits, but they do kind of bug you after a while.
I would second that from the external part. I often get things like, "Oh, you get to run around in the woods with the kids. Isn't that so nice? That's so sweet." And I come home exhausted. I mean, and yes, every once in a while I still do. I mean, that's how I started my career. But I still do get to run around in the woods with the kids. But and I make sure that I get to still do that. But that's not what being part of a nonprofit is. It's hard work. It's challenging. It takes special skills, and then internally, even I think I've experienced some scenarios where, thinking of an organization in particular that was not the best run organization, and people from inside also had some bias. Like, well, what do you expect? You work for a nonprofit, and I expect professionalism, and I expect results, and I expect accountability, and I expect efficiency and effectiveness, and all the things that a for-profit organization expects. So I no longer accept that excuse. So if you're working for a nonprofit and you hear that excuse, at least think about it. Stop and think about it. Think about what they're saying, and so there's some biases inside and outside as well. Yeah.
Somebody said it earlier, we spend other people's money. That's what we do. And so so one of our disadvantages, or one of our barriers, is our optics have to be a lot sharper on what if this shows up in the paper tomorrow morning? Is it defensible? Dan was right. I mean, but he's in rarefied air too. I mean, it was his that kind of fundraising is something that we're not familiar with, but his point was right. But like I said, at the end of the day, we got to be able to defend what we're doing in a way that for-profit corporations usually don't.
I will echo, in 30 years, where Bridging hits their 30th year, we've had marketing budgets before, but I will tell you, 2016 is the first year we actually had a very rich, bountiful marketing budget. that's a huge major step, because before you couldn't rationalize. One, we get anything we possibly can for free, but you got to know what you need and ask for it, and you have to be certain enough when someone says, I can do this, but you're like, I don't need that. You have to be able to say, no, thank you. But you go back to spending money. I will tell you back to the Y days. You talk about being a good steward. I had an actual person working for an insurance company bragging about how they're going on this big trip to Aruba for 150 people, spending $100,000. And I went, what? And I went, I just put on a conference for 2 days for 350 people for $5,000. What are you spending your money on? And that just shocked me. So when you talk about how are you spending your money, I kicked it right back and went, you can't tell me that was worth it. Yeah.
Perhaps we need to bring more accountability to all of our organizations in terms of use of our funds. We are scheduled to be here until after 1, so I'm kind of watching, folks. Other questions? Let's get Sam busy over there. Who has a question on that side for Sam?
Don't make me pick one of you.
Here we go. I'll come over this way.
I'm Marcus Whitman. I'm doing my service with Finnegan's. We talked a little bit about like minimum or wages in general. Right now, there's a lot of civil rights movements pushing for wages to be as high as $15 an hour as early as 2017. I'm just kind of curious if you guys are aware of that and how that would affect both where you work and just macro, like nonprofits in general. Thanks.
Killing us.
Yeah. Philosophically, it's easy to support, but bottom line, as a nonprofit with small margins, it reduces the money for the mission. It's challenging. So it's nothing we have figured out. We're dealing with it just as any other small business would.
Yeah, we're in a situation where we work with, we hire 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds. And we work with enough city money that city's always first in on wage increases. So even though the size of our organization doesn't dictate we have to raise the minimum wage, the city does that on our behalf. I mean, that's part of the deal of working with them. So consequently, we now have most of our apprentices just starting out are making $9 an hour, where they're $7.25 just 18 months ago. But then you see that down line then too. Everybody's got to move along with it. It's like Laura said, it's not a bad thing necessarily. I think there has to. Man, I can't believe I'm arguing this, but I think there needs to be some carve-outs. I think there needs to be a way to adjust it for size of organization, things like that. Or I think ultimately some employers in certain areas are just going to learn to do with less people, and then the unemployment rate with youth, soars even higher. So.
Yeah, and I have a very different perspective on this. When I started at Bridging, and Diana talked about the warehouse and delivery staff, mainly untrained. I mean, high school graduates, maybe college if we're lucky, but most of the time not. So low skill jobs. But my commitment to the organization was to create a pathway for all of our employees to earn a livable wage. I just felt like, the folks that are working for us because they believed in the mission. We're working with people who are very disadvantaged. But then I've got my delivery guy who's worried about paying his rent. It just didn't feel right to me. So we made that commitment. Now, it doesn't mean that people start at the livable wage, but they have a pathway through the salary range to reach that fairly quickly. It was $12 when I was there. Now, of course, it's going up to $15. And I'm sure it'll be a challenge for all nonprofits, but sometimes the people that work for us, they're our greatest asset, and they've made a choice to work for your nonprofit. They could go somewhere else. So I think you need to be fair.
Yeah, I would second that. I think that we have a responsibility to pay people. If the living wage is determined to be $16 an hour, then I feel that we have a responsibility to pay that. And if that means I have to do a little bit less work, and so because I have fewer staff, then that's what I need to do as a business person. I need to narrow my mission and do that until I have time to grow again. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Great question. Next question.
I'm Alex Tone. I'm servicing at Maternity Mary St. Andrew School, and so just kind of playing off of that, I guess, where do you guys see, I mean, we've kind of touched on it, but where do you guys see, like, the nonprofit industry in, like, the next 5 or 10 years, kind of based on salaries going up, based on college grads expecting more money after they graduate, just kind of things like that. What's your guys' opinion on where maybe the industry is going from here?
I do think one of the most exciting trends in nonprofit work right now is the sort of hybrid social enterprise things like Finnegan's. And I think we'll see more and more of those sort of straddling the nonprofit and for-profit world. And because those are profit centers, I think that will create more opportunities for non-traditional nonprofit careers.
Yeah, and I think also what you're going to see, and I think this is a good thing, is that pressure on salaries and your costs, I think is going to drive more nonprofits to merge together, which I think is good. I mean, we're the land of 10,000 nonprofits. We have everybody who, has a passion decides, oh, I'm going to start a nonprofit. And they don't look at the landscape to see who else is in that space. And, the pie of money will probably get bigger, but you're all competing for the same dollars pretty much. So there's going to have to be more consolidation, I think, in the marketplace for people to survive. But that's a good thing. They should be consolidated now.
I think the competition also we need to recognize is for dollars, but for clients, and also for volunteers. So how do we manage all three of those resources wisely?
Yeah, when I hear about duplicate services and when you hear about, you get around the table and like, I'm starting a new profit, and they say it and I go, there's already 3 of those.
Yeah.
Like, have you talked to them? Getting to know that landscape is huge, but also I've already met with millennials, and I'm just going to say it, who've come to me and they told me what they're doing, and I'm like, I don't know how they're going to make it, how they're going to sustain that. There's no business model in their startup. So what I would challenge you as business students is to how you can really marry this social enterprise with the nonprofit and everything you're learning to really make it sustainable. Because what will happen, and it's kind of my hope too, is that the strongest are going to survive through this, that we can narrow down to serve better. It's like we say in any of our business models, bridging's not about providing food or selling cars, furniture, housewares. We do that well. We tell others who kind of do it, like, hey, do you really want to, or get out of the business? Do what you do well, identify the families and get them to us. It's the same in any other thing. You just can't diversify just for the sake of diversifying.
We have time for one more question. Could you pass this forward?
Hello, my name is Sir. My volunteer service is at Edison High School for their golf team, and my question is, if you all could go back to the time when you're our age, what could you do differently so that right now you're more prepared of where you're going for the future, and what would you tell us younger folks what we should do so?
I'm not sure I know what to tell you not to do, but because sometimes the mistakes are the things that you learn the most from, or not even mistakes, the challenges, the rough experiences are sometimes the things I learned. I recently had to do an assignment as part of my nonprofit, one of my nonprofit classes at Hamlin, and it was basically assessing your values. And I realized through that process that most of my values have been confirmed or strengthened or hardened by the experiences that were really challenging for me, and not so much. I mean, I definitely got values from positive experiences, but the things that really stuck are the things. So be a sponge. Soak it all up, bad and good. Soak it up, take it in, learn from it, enjoy the moments where you have success and you're surrounded by people that support you, and look for a mentor, look for at least one, maybe two people in your life that can follow you and help you along the way, and be a sponge and just take it all in, and take everything in that you can, even the tough stuff.
Yeah, there are two phrases that I just heard early in my career, and I just keep them in mind all the time. They really guide me. One of them is, money's a tool to get what you need when you need it. Everything else is excess. And that is real. I remember being in a conference and heard that, and I just thought that was so profound, because when you really think about it, how much do you really need to live? I love your generation because you are working to live, not living to work. And I think that you're going to change the culture of organizations wherever you decide to go in a positive way. The other phrase that a dear friend of mine said to me, she said, you can tell where your priorities are by your calendar and your checkbook. And I often keep that in mind as well. Am I really living the values that I say I am? Look at your calendar, look at your checkbook. Where are you spending your time? Where are you spending your money? So that's my best advice. Or I could tell you, go work for a for-profit company that has stock options, earn a lot of money in your first 15 years, and then go work for a nonprofit.
Advice, words of wisdoms, a do-over you'd like to have?
I'm going to say rich experiences too, and mentors. I'm going to echo that because I think I luckily had it. I was able to take that and marry it with every few years, always sitting down and going, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Do I need something different? That constant assessment is important. And if you can clue into that earlier versus later, I'm telling you, you're going to be happy. You're going to wonder where those 10 years went. And I hear that from people. So start really identifying what you want and how you want to spend your time. You spend more time at work than anything else, right? More than your family, at home, anything. So you got to like it. Anytime I hear someone say, I'm at work, and I'm like, God, I don't think even when I was 15 I had jobs like that. You kind of did, but choose wisely. And move on when you need to.
And it seems like when I started out, it just seemed like career paths were more clear. It just was, and that's not a good thing. It's just how it was. I think it strikes me as I watch this economy now that, like, opportunity recognition is just more important than ever. I mean, you just have to be able to kind of see what's coming next, not what's right in front of you. And I actually got that exact same question from a class of an entrepreneurship class over at McAllister, and I, and it's you got to see it and then you got to jump. And I think if I made mistakes, it was probably looking back. It was I waited too long. I thought something through that didn't need to be thought through. And if I had to do it again, I'd think more quickly and I'd jump.
Well, I definitely agree with make a living, make a life, and the differentiation there. But I think too, you need to acknowledge, if you're going to work for a nonprofit, that there is an extra level or layer of pressure and stress that goes beyond making money for a company, knowing that the work that you do, there is a pressure there that you're responsible for the quality of life for a lot of people relying on your nonprofit's services, especially if you're on the fundraising side. So be prepared. I think if you're going into the nonprofit sector, be prepared for whether it's personal or influenced by the organization or both, that you should expect that you're personally going to put a lot of pressure on yourself to deliver not just to the bottom line, but to people's lives. So that's meaningful, and it's also challenging.
A couple of folks I want to thank. Sam and Amy from our office were here to help with sign-in, and if you didn't sign in that you're here, please see Sam to make sure you do the sign-in list. I want to thank Nick, our tech person, who's making this available, and this will be on YouTube. Thank you, Nick. And then, of course, I also want to thank our panelists. You've brought lots of insights. I'm sending Sam to the middle door here, and there are the discount coupons available to you. And just one more time as you're standing to thank our panelists.